The early morning of August 15, 2006, would forever alter the history of San Isidro, a distinguished district in Lima, Peru. Known for being one of the most exclusive areas in the nation's capital, San Isidro became the center of attention when one of its mansions became the scene of a crime without witnesses. That fateful morning, no one saw or heard anything. Even the property's dog remained silent. But by the following day, the horror came to light. After repeatedly knocking on the owner's bedroom door without receiving a response, the butler decided to enter. There, he discovered Miriam Feffer, a renowned real estate businesswoman, lying lifeless on the floor. The room was in disarray, bloodstains covered the surfaces, and the victim's false nails were broken, a clear indication of a violent struggle. Good evening, and welcome to Tales Tracks. Sylvia Miriam Feffer Olares was born in Peru in 1955 and was murdered in her own home at the age of 51. Her death did not go unnoticed, not only because of the brutal manner in which she was found, but also because she was already a well-known figure in the country, celebrated for her success in the real estate industry. Feffer owned a thriving real estate company and was a prominent member of Lima's Jewish community. Despite belonging to Lima's high society, she never conformed to social expectations when it came to her private life. She had divorced her husband, the father of her 2 children, and the media frequently linked her to various romantic affairs. Beautiful, successful, and with an active social life, Miriam Feffer never went unnoticed. When authorities arrived at the crime scene, they swiftly ruled out robbery as a motive. Although her children, Eva and Eva Bracamonte, and the butler, Simeon Arcaya, had been asleep on different floors of the house, the perpetrator had neither forced entry nor stolen valuables. Only the victim's cell phone and laptop were missing. As the investigation commenced, forensic specialists collected 14 DNA samples from Feffer's inner circle, marking the beginning of a case that would soon grip the nation. The DNA samples were taken from her 2 children, her lawyer, her half-brothers, and even her hairdresser. However, the results led investigators nowhere. The samples did not match the traces of skin and blood found at the crime scene or under the victim's nails. When the autopsy results were released, it was confirmed that Feffer had been strangled. The depth and contour of the marks on her neck indicated that the attack had been carried out using a thin constricting element, possibly a rope or cable. Additionally, forensic analysis revealed 4 abrasions on her neck, consistent with pressure marks from fingers. This evidence suggested that both ligature and manual strangulation had been used to end Miriam Feffer's life. Despite the media frenzy surrounding the case, authorities had no solid leads to advance the investigation. It was clear that Feffer had been murdered, yet there were no viable suspects. Due to the lack of conclusive evidence, the case was officially closed in January 2009, a grim resolution that left Peru with an unsolved crime that many believed would fade into oblivion. However, just when the case seemed forgotten, a tip-off from Argentine authorities would change everything. In Salta, a provincial capital in northern Argentina, a man claimed to be the murderer of the Lima businesswoman. His name was Alejandro Trujillo Ospina, a Colombian national who was serving a 3.5-year prison sentence for extortion. Trujillo Ospina was no ordinary criminal, he was a contract killer. But what truly shocked investigators was his confession. He had not been hired to kill Miriam Feffer. His original target had been Arturo Vancour, a lawyer. Trujillo Ospina had initially been hired to assassinate Arturo Vancour, a lawyer with ties to political power in northern Argentina. However, instead of carrying out the hit, he struck a deal with his target, agreeing to spare Vancour's life in exchange for a payment of $50,000. The arrangement quickly unraveled when Vancour reported the extortion attempt to the authorities. In 2007, just as the hitman was about to collect his money, he was captured by the Salta police. But how was Trujillo Ospina, a Colombian national arrested in Argentina, linked to a murder that took place in Peru in 2006? By January 2009, Trujillo Ospina had served nearly half of his prison sentence, making him eligible for temporary leave and even the possibility of early release. However, his own recklessness sealed his fate. In an attempt to earn the respect of fellow inmates, he boasted about being the murderer of Miriam Feffer. One of the prisoners not only took his claim seriously but also alerted the prison authorities, who in turn contacted the Peruvian police. At first, Argentine officials dismissed the confession as mere prison gossip, suspecting that it might have been a ploy to gain notoriety behind bars. However, the truth soon came to light. By July 2009, forensic tests confirmed that the blood found at the crime scene in Lima was a match to Trujillo Ospina's DNA. This irrefutable evidence proved that he had been present in Miriam Feffer's residence in the early hours of August 15, 2006. Armed with this crucial finding, Peruvian authorities formally requested his extradition. In early 2010, the Argentine Foreign Ministry approved the extradition, and Trujillo Ospina was handed over to Peruvian authorities. Yet, critical questions remained. Why would Trujillo Ospina murder Miriam Feffer? What connection did he have to her family? And who had ordered the hit? The answers seemed clear. Trujillo Ospina was a hitman, meaning he didn't need personal motives to take the life of the businesswoman, only an order and a payment. In 2009, before his extradition to Peru, Trujillo Ospina made a shocking confession. He had been hired by Eva Bracamonte, none other than Miriam Feffer's own daughter. From that moment, the case escalated dramatically. The alleged motive? Money. Eva was accused of ordering her mother's murder to gain access to a $3 million inheritance. Since Miriam was divorced and had never remarried, Eva and her brother Ariel were the sole heirs. However, authorities believed that Eva had not acted alone. They suspected she had planned the crime with the help of her then-partner, Liliana Castro. By September 2009, the investigation had uncovered even more incriminating evidence. Trujillo Ospina had used Miriam Feffer's stolen phone to call Eva just minutes after committing the murder. Additionally, suspicions arose from within the family itself. Ariel Bracamonte, Eva's own brother, publicly stated that he could not swear to his sister's innocence. With all the evidence laid out, authorities ordered the arrest of Eva Bracamonte and Liliana Castro. Before being detained, both women chose to surrender voluntarily. They were immediately transferred to Chorrillos Maximum Security Prison, where they awaited trial. Finally, on March 8, 2012, almost 6 years after Miriam Feffer's murder, the long-awaited oral trial began, where the accused would have to defend themselves against the charges. The alleged perpetrator, Alejandro Trujillo Ospina, and the suspected masterminds, Eva Bracamonte and Liliana Castro, stood trial in a legal process that lasted more than 7 months. The case had a tremendous impact on Peruvian society, with each stage of the proceedings closely followed on television. From the very beginning, Eva and Liliana pleaded not guilty to the charges brought by the prosecution. However, the person who drew the most attention was Trujillo Ospina. The hitman retracted his previous confessions, now claiming that he had killed the businesswoman by accident, allegedly after she caught him robbing her home. One of the key voices in the trial was forensic expert Gladys Samami Vallejos, who conducted Miriam Feffer's autopsy. After thoroughly examining the body, she confirmed that the cause of death was strangulation. The victim had suffered serious facial injuries, a deep wound on one of her legs, and visible signs of resistance, indicating a violent struggle. Samami Vallejos determined that Miriam was murdered between 12:30 and 2:30 a.m. on August 15th. The fatal confrontation had likely lasted around 15 minutes and took place inside her bedroom and adjoining bathroom. The 4 cm deep wound on her right leg had been caused by broken glass from a shattered pane. When questioned by the judge, the forensic expert clarified a crucial detail: the strangulation occurred at the very end of the struggle, sealing Miriam Feffer's tragic fate. The injuries suffered by the victim were allegedly inflicted by Trujillo Ospina with the intent of subduing her. In other words, his goal was to weaken her defenses until he had total control over her, allowing him to strangle her. During the 15-minute struggle, the attacker covered Miriam's mouth with his hand, at which point the businesswoman, in a desperate act, bit him, causing an injury. Although this detail might seem minor, that bite proved crucial in solving the case. The murderer left a drop of blood at the crime scene, a DNA trace that, years later, would be decisive in confirming his guilt. Another key figure in the trial was Ariel Bracamonte, son of Miriam Feffer and brother of Eva. In line with his earlier statements, where he suggested that his sister might have been involved in their mother's murder, Ariel maintained that Eva had done nothing to help their mother. According to his testimony, after the butler warned him about the condition in which he had found Miriam, both ran to her room. However, their reactions were completely opposite. Ariel claimed that he immediately approached his mother to check on her condition and asked Eva to call an ambulance, but, according to him, his sister did nothing to assist her. It is important to note that, during this judicial proceeding, the Bracamonte siblings did not confront each other directly, though this was a possibility. Eva's lawyer explained that his client refused to face her brother, as, for her, doing so would have been like reliving the moment of her mother's death. From Argentina, a key witness also testified via teleconference, Reynaldo Choque Barrios, an officer at the Salta prison where Trujillo Ospina had been incarcerated. In his statement, the guard revealed that he had received between 5 and 6 phone calls and 2 emails from Maria Gloria Venega, opening new lines of investigation. A woman who identified herself as the ex-mother-in-law of the self-confessed murderer of Miriam Feffer came forward. During her communications with Reynaldo Choque Barrios, the Argentine officer, she stated that her ex-son-in-law had repeatedly told her that he had murdered a successful Peruvian businesswoman on the orders of her daughter, so that she could inherit her fortune. Despite the exhaustive forensic analysis, the testimony of the Argentine officer, and his previous confessions, Trujillo Ospina continued to surprise until the very end. Against all logic, in his final statements, the alleged perpetrator of the crime maintained that he did not know his co-accused, Eva Bracamonte and Liliana Castro, and denied that anyone had paid him to commit the murder. After 7 months of a high-profile trial, the court delivered its final verdict on October 12, 2012. However, the sentencing had to be temporarily suspended as Eva fainted and convulsed, requiring immediate hospitalization. Finally, on October 15th, the court acquitted Liliana Castro of aggravated homicide for profit, ruling that there was insufficient evidence to convict her. However, it found Alejandro Trujillo Ospina guilty of aggravated homicide for profit and tort and Eva Bracamonte guilty as well. Trujillo Ospina was sentenced to 35 years in prison, while Eva Bracamonte received a 30-year sentence. Both were also ordered to pay civil compensation of 900,000 sols, approximately $240,000 to the legal heirs, namely Ariel Bracamonte. Following the ruling, Eva was imprisoned in the Chorrillos Women's Prison, where she is to remain until October 9, 2039. Trujillo Ospina, on the other hand, was transferred to the maximum security Piedras Gordas prison, where he will serve his sentence until November 11, 2044. Upon her release, Liliana Castro spoke out about Eva's conviction, expressing gratitude that her own innocence had finally been proven. However, she also made it clear that she was not entirely happy, as she could not celebrate while Eva remained behind bars. Liliana publicly stated that she loved Eva and vowed to do everything in her power to help her prove her innocence. Throughout the trial, whenever they had the chance to be near each other, Eva and Liliana displayed great affection. In addition to having been a romantic couple, Liliana had long been considered a close friend of the Bracamonte family. Although no sufficient evidence was found to directly link Liliana Castro to the crime, her relationship with Eva Bracamonte was repeatedly used to divert attention from the core investigation. More than a decade ago, Peruvian society was deeply conservative regarding sexual diversity. The media seized on this, portraying Eva and Liliana's relationship in an exaggerated and sensationalist manner. This biased treatment extended into the trial. On several occasions, Eva's sexual orientation was brought up not as a relevant fact, but rather as an attempt to discredit her character and lifestyle. Prosecutors and the opposing legal team framed her relationship with Liliana as evidence of an allegedly troubled personality, despite this having no direct connection to the case. By October 2012, both the perpetrator and the alleged mastermind were behind bars, and it seemed that the mystery of Miriam Feffer's murder had been resolved. However, in 2013, a dramatic legal turn would change Eva's fate. That year, Eva Bracamonte appealed her 30-year prison sentence, arguing that her conviction as the mastermind behind her mother's murder had been the result of a flawed trial. Her defense team asserted that the 2012 legal proceedings had been riddled with inconsistencies and unfair biases. Eva Bracamonte's defense team argued that her trial had been riddled with irregularities and that the evidence against her was insufficient and contradictory. They also maintained that details of her private life, including her sexual orientation, had been used in a discriminatory manner, largely to fuel media sensationalism surrounding the case. Following the appeal, the Peruvian Supreme Court reviewed the arguments and, in 2013, declared the original sentence null, citing serious flaws in the trial. As a result, the court ordered a retrial for Eva Bracamonte. At the same time, the then president of the criminal court, Javier Villastein, ruled for her immediate release, allowing her to await the new trial outside of prison. Once free, Eva sought to clear her name. In an interview, she accused her brother, Ariel, of fabricating evidence to falsely incriminate her. However, these statements had no impact on Ariel's legal standing. In 2014, when the new trial began, the Bracamonte siblings were summoned for a face-to-face confrontation. The exchange was tense and intense, with Eva accusing Ariel of portraying her as their mother's murderer, while Ariel countered that she had already spent years in prison for the crime. Finally, on December 29, 2014, the second trial against Eva Bracamonte for the murder of her mother came to an end. The Supreme Court of Justice of Lima ruled in her favor, acquitting her of all charges. The magistrates concluded that there was no evidence of an economic motive for the homicide and dismissed a key phone call made by Trujillo Ospina on the morning of the murder as irrelevant to the case. Without this call as decisive probative evidence, the prosecution was unable to establish a connection between Eva Bracamonte and Trujillo Ospina. No other conversations or financial transactions were found, and the hitman's testimony, which had been crucial in the first trial, was deemed inconsistent and unreliable due to his multiple conflicting statements. Finally, in May 2017, the Second Transitional Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court upheld Eva Bracamonte's acquittal, officially declaring her free of guilt and charges. As for Trujillo Ospina, he has now served 12 years of his 35-year sentence, but his judicial situation remains unchanged. He is expected to remain behind bars until November 2044. From the very beginning, the identity of the perpetrator was clear. However, 18 years after the murder of the successful businesswoman, lingering questions remain unanswered. Who orchestrated the crime? Why did someone want Miriam Feffer dead at that time? If one thing is certain, it's that this was not a robbery, and that Trujillo Ospina was merely a hired killer. So, who truly planned the murder of this successful businesswoman? Once again, dear audience, thank you for joining me on this new story. If you found today's case interesting and informative,